President Donald Trump is escalating his confrontation with Canada after trade negotiations between Washington and Ottawa collapsed, triggering a new round of tariffs and retaliation. Trump says Canada wants the benefits of being an American state without actually becoming one, while Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney says the United States has pushed the two countries into a trade war. What was supposed to be a major trade agreement has now turned into one of the most serious economic disputes between the two longtime allies in years. The latest breakdown came after both sides had expressed optimism that a deal could be reached. Instead, negotiations fell apart after American and Canadian officials accused each other of changing the terms at the last minute. Carney says Washington asked for concessions that Canada simply could not accept, while U.S. officials argue that Canada introduced new demands and backed away from previously discussed terms. Now, the consequences are beginning to take effect. The United States has imposed new tariffs of up to 50% on roughly $20 billion worth of Canadian goods. That does not mean every Canadian product entering the United States is facing a 50% tariff. The latest measures cover only a portion of Canadian exports, including products such as dairy, wine, cement, clothing, furniture, fishing equipment, and hockey gear. These new tariffs are also being added on top of existing American duties affecting major Canadian industries such as steel, aluminum, automobiles, and lumber. That means businesses on both sides of the border are now dealing with a growing list of trade restrictions, creating even more uncertainty for manufacturers, retailers, farmers, and consumers. Trump responded to the collapse of negotiations by once again criticizing Canada's trade relationship with the United States. He argued that Canada has enjoyed many of the economic advantages of its close relationship with America while continuing to protect certain Canadian industries from U.S. competition. Trump has repeatedly pointed to Canada's dairy system and other agricultural policies as examples of what he considers unfair treatment of American producers. But Canada's government strongly rejects the idea that it should accept Washington's demands simply because the United States is its largest trading partner. Carney says the American proposal went beyond tariffs and crossed into areas that Canada considers questions of economic independence and sovereignty. According to the Canadian government, some of Washington's demands would have limited Canada's ability to negotiate future trade relationships with other countries. Carney made his position clear, saying the United States asked too much while offering too little in return. He also rejected claims that Canada suddenly changed its demands at the end of negotiations, arguing instead that Canadian officials repeatedly sought clarification about what Washington was actually offering. The Canadian government is now preparing to retaliate. Carney says Canada will respond dollar for dollar to the latest American tariffs, with additional Canadian duties scheduled to take effect on September 8. The countermeasures are expected to target a range of American goods, including steel, dairy products, electronics, appliances, agricultural equipment, and other exports. Carney has acknowledged that retaliation could have consequences for Canadian consumers, including higher prices and fewer choices. But his government argues that doing nothing would leave Canadian businesses and workers exposed while allowing Washington to increase economic pressure without facing consequences. When Carney was asked whether the United States and Canada are now officially in a trade war, his response showed just how serious the situation has become. He said that when a country is attacked economically, it has to respond. That is unusually strong language between two countries that have historically shared one of the closest economic relationships in the world. And that relationship is enormous. The United States and Canada exchange hundreds of billions of dollars in goods and services every year. Canadian energy, lumber, metals, food products, and automotive components flow into the United States, while American companies sell machinery, vehicles, agricultural products, technology, and consumer goods north of the border. The two economies are also deeply connected through manufacturing supply chains. A vehicle assembled in North America, for example, can contain components that cross the US-Canada border multiple times before the final product reaches a dealership. When tariffs are placed on those goods, businesses can face higher costs at several different stages of production. Supporters of Trump's tariff strategy argue that these measures could encourage companies to manufacture more products inside the United States and reduce America's dependence on foreign suppliers. They also believe tariffs give Washington stronger leverage during negotiations. Critics, however, warn that tariffs can also raise costs for American companies that rely on Canadian materials and components. Those businesses may then pass some of those additional expenses on to consumers. Canadian retaliation could also make American exports more expensive north of the border, potentially hurting farmers and manufacturers that depend on Canadian customers. Another major issue hanging over this dispute is the future of the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement, better known as USMCA. The trade agreement replaced NAFTA during Trump's first administration and created the rules governing much of North American commerce. The United States, Canada, and Mexico are now dealing with a major review of that agreement, and the collapse of US-Canada negotiations could make those discussions even more difficult. Canada and Mexico have supported extending the agreement, while Washington has been pushing for changes involving automobiles, agriculture, manufacturing rules, and broader economic security concerns. If relations between the United States and Canada continue deteriorating, negotiations over the future of USMCA could become another major battleground. Canada is also trying to reduce its economic dependence on the United States by strengthening trade relationships with Europe, Asia, and other global markets. But that will not be easy. The United States remains by far Canada's most important customer, receiving the majority of Canadian exports. At the same time, the United States also depends heavily on Canada for important products and resources. That mutual dependence is exactly what makes this trade confrontation so significant. Neither side can completely separate from the other without creating serious economic consequences. For Trump, the strategy appears to be about using America's enormous market as leverage. His administration believes Canada ultimately has more to lose from a prolonged confrontation because of its dependence on U.S. consumers. For Carney, however, accepting an agreement viewed as unfair could create political and economic consequences of its own. Canadian leaders from several political parties and provinces have expressed support for standing up to Washington, even while acknowledging that a prolonged trade dispute could cost jobs. So the question now is what happens next? U.S. officials say there are currently no immediate plans to restart negotiations, while Canada is moving ahead with retaliation. That means businesses and consumers on both sides of the border could be entering a period of prolonged uncertainty. What began as a negotiation over tariffs has now become a much larger fight over trade, economic independence, political leverage, and the future of one of the world's most important economic partnerships. Trump says Canada has benefited from its relationship with the United States without giving America enough in return. Carney says Washington demanded concessions Canada could never accept. And with both sides now imposing tariffs, neither government appears ready to back down. The biggest question is no longer simply who wins this trade dispute. The bigger question is whether the economic relationship between the United States and Canada is beginning to fundamentally change. Do you think Trump's tariff strategy will eventually force Canada back to the negotiating table? Or could this trade war end up hurting businesses and consumers on both sides of the border? Let me know what you think in the comments, and subscribe for more breaking political, economic, and international news.